A sense of adventure is something I find rather special when it comes to video games as a medium due to its interactive nature. You're not just watching a tale unfold by itself, you become an active participant, sharing the highs and lows of the journey as you move towards the unknown. Phenotopia expertly accomplishes this feat through its vast world that's not only fun to traverse, but also quite a sight to behold, while being packed full of secrets and side objectives to discover. Action, adventure, and side-scroller may sound like broad terms, but they're perfect to describe this title without needing too much explanation. I'm a little hesitant on the Metroidvania category, however labels are useful for a reason, and I think there are certain aspects that make it fit quite nicely. Gail, the game's protagonist, gets a wide array of tools over her long quest, each with their own specific uses in combat and exploration, serving as a vehicle not only to the progression of the narrative, but also for her own character as she grows stronger to tackle greater challenges, while simultaneously being able to return to previous areas better equipped to find extra loot. The plot is a relatively simple save-the-world type of deal. However, as they say, what matters is the journey, not the destination, and the devil is in the details. After a quick introduction, we're shown that Gail's entire hometown, including her brother, is abducted by aliens, and only the children that were out exploring at the time came out unscathed. Thankfully, we don't get a Lord of the Flies scenario, and they manage to keep things running decently enough, albeit with a cloud of worry and apprehension looming over their heads. This is one of many points that tip this seemingly simple story into a rather special territory. As the days go by, you see the kids question themselves as they attain a new normal, so to speak. And as time heals all wounds, genuine doubts start to crop up whether it's okay to move on from such a horrific event in the first place. The seemingly bright and cheerful nature of the game can peel back at times to reveal some mature themes, which go a long way to strengthen our connection to the characters on display. I should also mention that the opening makes it explicit the game takes place in a post-apocalyptic world. There was a great war and humans went underground for many years until they came back to the surface. The parallels with Fallout and its vaults are noticeable, but that's where they end. As you can see from the footage, we're pretty far removed from the proverbial fallout of the near extinction event. In fact, the game takes place a long while after the healing has kicked in. This raises some questions as players are going through the game, since the world's society seems to be at a medieval level, contrasted by clear sci-fi elements, such as science labs, the conspicuous aliens which abducted Gail's town, and the many Golem NPCs, which are for all intents and purposes robots, to name a few. This anachronism may seem rather strange at first, but is used to great effect as you find remnants of the previous civilization just a little beyond most inhabitants' watch, making them almost mystical artifacts in their eyes, while being unnervingly familiar to us players. And going further than that, the game's story provides a lot of explanations which will make quite a lot of sense in retrospect. I think I hammered this point enough without spoiling too much, but suffice to say the plot is deceptively simple. There are many layers to unfold here, and they're a great reward for more attentive players that choose to explore every nook and cranny of the world. A commendable thing about all this is that the vast majority of it is entirely optional. Sure, there's a certain structure in place for the main quest, as it were, guiding people from point A to point B, but there's a lot more beyond it. In a lot of ways, it's quite brave of the developers to make so much side content that a lot of players won't see. However, that's also part of what's special about this title to begin with. You're not really forced to do a lot besides the main plot. I've seen people finish the game with as little as 50% completion, and I don't doubt you could go even lower. So the satisfaction of finding new things doesn't just come from the various trinkets and upgrades scattered throughout, but the very content itself becomes its own reward. Let's take a look at the first dungeon, for instance. It's a simple affair of collecting 3 stones, which serve as keys to unlock the path to the boss, but you can collect them at any order you desire. And the players that do explore everything will notice they end up with a few leftovers, which not only serves to open the only bonus room available at this time, but also to tease that there's more than meets the eye here, and you'll certainly be rewarded if you choose to return better equipped later. As you can see, there's a little shrine of sorts with more receptacles for these keys, guarding another set of closed doors. Come back here after you've got the bombs, and suddenly you open up a whole new, more dangerous part of the dungeon, including one of the many totally optional bosses waiting at the end. If you wait until you have the spear, you'll even be able to climb on top of the dungeon itself, and find that there was a hidden goodie up there as well. Go one level higher and the overworld is filled with such examples. Each main area has a few obvious and some hidden landmarks to check out, which can contain NPCs with unique side quests, challenges, treasure, or even a resting spot to continue your journey, all with varying functionality depending on your current arsenal. This is what I meant by the game having this Metroidvania quality to it, but it does so without sacrificing the more standard adventure elements you would find in other games, such as the Zelda series, which contains sprawling towns full of fun NPCs with different personalities to interact with, and even mini-games to play, which make for a great mix for a truly living and breathing world. I'd also like to note not only how beautiful the game looks, but how expressive all the animations feel. From the obvious one shown by our protagonist as she's tired, confused, or proud, all the way to the dialogue bubbles themselves. There's a certain duality between the safe havens of towns, or just smaller locales with NPCs, and the exploration with puzzles and combat that complement each other quite well, since they provide breaks often enough so a single one of those elements never wear out their welcome. When it comes to the topic of items, a bulk of it is simply bought in stores, and you get a great mileage out of them, so they're not simply keys for very specific obstacles. In fact, there are plenty of little challenges and secrets which simply become easier when you do have certain items, but they're certainly doable before acquiring them too. This also avoids more obtuse scenarios of having to use the item you just got in a dungeon to beat its boss. Combat itself is a different ordeal than your standard exploration and puzzle solving, and it works well for what it is. However, I do have to levy some criticism here to say that late game encounters are dominated by the use of the spear and crossbow respectively. They really do outclass everything else in the game combat-wise, although your bat is still pretty viable early to mid-game. The spear itself is a very interesting item. There are some areas you see early on that makes you think you get a double jump eventually, as it's an established convention of the medium, but you get this non-standard item instead, which allows you to create your own platforms, with the obvious drawback that it can't be used anywhere as it needs a wall to latch onto. All these little design decisions compound to make a game greater than the sum of its parts, with plenty of unique uses for its little armory of items. Gail herself is granted a couple movement options, and mastering them can certainly tip most encounters in your favor. The game even has a couple NPCs which explain some of the finer intricacies of these systems if the player hasn't figured them out on their own by that point, like timing a press of the sprint button as her heron's being pushed backwards to recover a lot quicker than she would have otherwise. These techniques are basically a necessity for some of the tougher fights in the game, so it's a nice balancing act to reveal them around the middle point of the game for those that are paying attention. One thing I'm a little iffy on is the fact that Gail can turn around mid-jump. You can certainly control her while she's in the air well enough, but not being able to make her face another direction can make you miss a couple shots. This does make you put a little more consideration into your movement and eventual muscle memory, but I'm still not entirely sure on whether I overall feel more positively or negatively towards this quirk. There's a stamina system for most of her actions, which means you simply can't just spam attacks and brute force through enemies. It creates an ebb and flow for battles, which force you to be cautious and stand back while it's regenerating. This also has the side effect of making you focus on the enemy, learn their patterns, and how they interweave with each other when multiple types are thrown into the mix. The system does come with a few drawbacks to exploration though. Most of your items also cost stamina, so it can be a little bit frustrating at times to know exactly what you have to do, but having to wait for the stamina bar to do its thing. At first I thought about suggesting an unlimited stamina in quote-unquote puzzle or exploratory sections, but this is an issue a lot more complex than it may seem given how inseparable combat from both those aspects are. adding to the fact that such a system could potentially spoil safe zones, and it's difficult to propose a more elegant solution than the one we already got. The game does contain more standard keys for certain areas, but they're mostly relegated to your flute, as they're doled out in form of songs that Gail can learn. Another of Zelda's many influences. That said, your instrument is also one of the various items you get high mileage out of, because it's used for many puzzles which don't rely on the full regular song the game teaches you, but one-off tunes which become their own little brain teasers to figure out. There is even some musical note Sudoku, which shows just how far the developers were willing to push each individual mechanic. There's a really neat and surprising use for your instrument late in the game too, but once again, I don't want to spoil too much. All this ties into upgrades. Pretty much anything in Gail's arsenal can be upgraded in one shape or another, from learning new songs to getting new combat abilities or even improved versions of certain items. There's a lot of ways the game can throw a reward at you without it ever feeling too samey. The big three though are definitely heart crystals, energy gems, and moonstones. The first two upgrade your health and stamina pool with 55 and 33 of each respectively, showing just how far you can push things if you go for completion, while there's also 111 of the third one, which is used as currency for the more exoteric upgrades in the game. I'd recommend people give at least 30 to 40 for this little green sciencey gal over here when you do meet her. You certainly won't regret it later on. One could initially think that Gail may become a veritable powerhouse with all that stuff, but once again the developers showed foresight and designed plenty of challenges with those items and upgrades in mind, including another totally optional boss fight, the most challenging of the game in fact, locked behind the requirement of being fully maxed out in health and stamina for instance, so they can fine-tune the difficulty accordingly. The other bosses are certainly no slouch either, so it's not like you just cruise through the game if you are diligent enough to get all the upgrades. In fact, there is a certain pattern as you're going through the game, where you get comfortable with the current difficulty level, but it's always dialed back up to the point where you're struggling again for a bit, as you learn to deal with the new curveballs thrown your way. Another of Gail's many abilities is cooking. Funnily enough, there's even an upgrade for that late into the game. It can come in handy as a little survival element to the experience, especially with the addition of fishing, but I find it didn't get its chance to shine out that often. The abundance of save points and other healing options make it more of a last-ditch effort kind of thing, instead of an active, practical and survival on the road type of deal. I was perfectly happy to continue with a few points of HP on more than one occasion, as even if I died, the punishment for it wasn't too harsh anyways. I like the fact that you get the cooked version of certain food items if you kill the little critters with explosions. These little touches enhance the believability of the world without sacrificing its stylized visuals. There is a section near the end of the game which utilizes cooking as a means of survival to great effect however, and it shows how sometimes stripping the player of options and getting them out of their comfort zone may be even more beneficial than it initially seems. At that point, you really don't have any other choice than to press onwards, so you must make do with what you have. The game does become rather generous with food at the latter end of this particular track though, which while it does provide some relief, I feel that it could have been delayed a bit more until the area was fully finished, otherwise it robs a bit of the impact in my eyes. Forcing Gail to prepare better and keep going forward with an ever-dwindling amount of supplies would elevate an already great section to much more memorable levels, especially considering the thematic significance of said area at that point in the story. Finally, I also enjoy how it takes real time to actually eat, so it's hardly viable as a crutch in combat, although some harder bosses do have a few windows which allow eating, and the very best healing items are very quick to gobble up, but are incredibly rare, so it more or less balances things out. There would be nothing stopping you from bringing an infinite supply without the inventory limit, so I can understand its inclusion. However, inventory management leaves a bit to be desired. I wish discarding items didn't make them straight up disappear into thin air, but drop them on the ground instead. Another useful addition would be the ability to inspect things before picking them up to see if it's worthwhile or not. Key items not occupying inventory space is a smart design choice, but I wish more of them had that treatment, especially the lunar treasures, which players will always want to pick up. I understand the risk and reward proposition of getting loot at the cost of fewer supplies, but like I said previously, that only really works in a few sections of the game. There's also the fact that you don't really know if something will eventually be useful or not. There are so many little side interactions with NPCs which will make you consider dropping something a lot more than you would have otherwise. Most items have their sources, of course, so you can always make a mental note and go back for more when needed, but sometimes that return trip can turn out to be a needless hassle. However, this is also a difficult area to consider changes, since a lot of those items end up being food ones. I do think there should be a limitation on the player's healing capacity on the go, but the interaction with picking up other things and weighing in their worth could be an interesting decision, although as it stands, it's not really used to full effect. There certainly are other games with more interesting inventory systems, but I also concede that this is a rather small point that doesn't really hurt the overall experience. It would just serve to improve if it had been done a little bit better. The core aspects of exploration are fantastically done. There are little secrets everywhere for perceptive players. One of my favorites plays with the sound of your footsteps, so it's possible to notice something's amiss and investigate further. You end up developing a sense for these things, but even then I'd be very impressed if someone found everything their first time through. The world itself is also surprisingly interconnected. There are plenty of shortcuts to be found that make a lot of sense in retrospect. When it comes to the overworld I mentioned earlier, you have a classic RPG style interface, which serves to give the world a grander scale and make the journey that much more impactful. Sure, Gail traverses through all the areas you control her in a side-scroller for most of the game, but this map screen goes to show the world itself is much bigger than those locales, and you're only seeing the highlights up close. It's a nice way to give a sense of distance between the various cities, dungeons, and other points of interest without getting in the way of the gameplay. There's also a few enemies that pop up which would trigger some random encounters, but unfortunately there's hardly a lot of reasons to go through these ordeals. The music is a really nice touch though, with a remixed version of the overall track that continues playing exactly where it was, making for a smooth and exciting transition. This trend doesn't continue for other overworld and random encounter tracks, but they're still great in their own right. While we're on the topic, I'd like to give the soundtrack its due praise. There's not a single track in the entire game I would consider bad or merely passable. They're all very well crafted to fit the area and the mood they play in. Another side of the same coin is that the game also knows when to show restraint and be completely quiet for a while to build up tension or for some of the more somber moments of the game. You have the upbeat tracks that give you a grand sense of adventure, but also more subdued and melancholy-filled tunes for certain moments of the experience. There's definitely an underlying sense of loss and sorrow to this world, of mistakes that were made which, even while buried down the sands of time, can rear their ugly heads every now and then and show lasting consequences of choices which were maybe even pragmatic or made sense at the time, but given the grander scope of our existence, might have not been better for the long haul. The overall takeaway of the game, just like its post-apocalyptic setting, is definitely focused on the healing aspect of things though, of learning to move past those mistakes and becoming better because we learned from them. It's quite uplifting and a great way to close off an otherwise bleak chapter in the story. I can't end this video without mentioning this game also had a Flash counterpart released many years ago. In the words of the developers, the original version can be considered a rough outline, whereas Phenotopia Awakening is the full embodiment of the game's vision. It succinctly outlines its lineage, but I think it's interesting to dive into a few aspects of it while we're at it. The changes start at the text intro you see when you begin a new game. Players who played the Flash version prior to Awakening will notice a glaring omission when comparing the two, with a quick and obvious conclusion that it was saved to be revealed at a later point in the story. I'm fond of this change because it once again shows that sometimes less is more, and the amount of information given to the player can change a great deal of things and make certain moments hit harder. At the same time, the remake expands on a lot of aspects of the lore with optional dialogue and documents to uncover relating to dungeons, factions, towns, neighboring kingdoms and their history, which is also beneficial to show this is a really lived-in place. Other notable changes include giving the golems a lot more personality in Awakening, which is one of the many additions I never knew I even wanted, but I'm all the happier for it. The overall map instead of merely a level select screen, which brings benefits I've already talked about, but another well-integrated addition comes in the forms of hints. Notice how the Flash version showed you if there were still collectibles in a certain area. As a completionist, I love the feature, and for a large portion of the remake I thought it was simply removed. But no, it actually comes in the form of a late-game fortune teller, which helped you find a few things you've missed. It's a very quote-unquote lore-friendly and totally optional addition to the game, which more than anything tells me the developers really respect their players' time. I could go on with further changes, but it would definitely enter spoiler territory. It's also why I'm hesitant to recommend the Flash version, before you play Awakening at least, because while there are many changes, you'll still be spoiled on a lot of things. I still think it's honestly one of, if not the very best Flash games I've ever played, and while it's completely free, I would have no qualms over paying regular price for it, but the remake raises the bar so high it completely eclipses it, which is kinda the point. It's a much shorter origin point which should be experienced after you finished Awakening in my eyes. For comparison's sake, the newer game took me around 50 hours to complete, while it was just around 10 to 12 in the former, which is still quite substantial for a Flash game. As a closing note to this point, I think the Flash version is worth playing afterwards because there were big changes to the ending, which are pretty intriguing to experience for yourself. If nothing else, Phenotopia Awakening shows how a good idea can be polished into a beautiful gem. If any of this sounded even remotely interesting, you owe it to yourself to pick it up and play, as one of the greatest things I find wrong with this whole thing is nothing with the game itself, but how little popularity or word of mouth it garnered over its launch cycle for the Nintendo Switch in August of 2020. This is a criminally underappreciated game that is in dire need of some more love. I hope the PC release later down the line brings a new surge in popularity, so even if you don't have the means to play it now, at the very least, you know about it for the future.